Hello everyone. Today I am bringing you a textbook example of stone-cold clarity. In this day and age, there are actually men who think women can't survive without them. Let's go watch this supremely satisfying husband-divorcing spectacle together. In the late autumn of the capital city, the chill had quietly seeped through the blue bricks and green tiles of Prince Yan's mansion. Inside the main hall, the underfloor heating burned vigorously, yet it couldn't warm through the frozen deathly silence. Xiao Jingyan lightly tossed a separation agreement with ink, still wet, onto the rosewood table in front of me. At this moment, the white moonlight of his heart, Suwana, was leaning weakly and boneless against his broad chest, holding a silk handkerchief embroidered with twin lotus flowers, delicately coughing in a soft voice. King Siwana has a weak constitution and can't endure the slightest grievance or upset. Xiao Jingyan's voice was low, carrying a condescending, patronizing arrogance. These 3 years you've been wronged by staying in the position of the legitimate wife. Sign it and vacate the position for Wana. This prince guarantees your latter half of life in the capital will be without worry for food and clothing, and will never let you return to your maternal home to suffer others' scorn. His tone was so bland, as if discussing what to have for tonight's dinner. As if I, Shen Qingqi, would immediately starve to death on the streets the moment I left his Prince Yan's mansion. I sat upright in the Huangguali wood armchair, quietly gazing at that handsome face before me, one that once captivated my heart but now filled me with utter disgust. The last ripple in my heart had turned into stagnant water. 3 years ago, I brought my magnificent 10 Janlai wedding procession, 120 Jan 8 palanquins packed full with dowry, and married into Prince Yan's manor with a heart full of joy. He thought we were childhood sweethearts, that I was marrying into a love as harmonious as music. But I was wrong. Utterly wrong. What I married into was nothing but the Shen family's military power he desperately needed on his path to seizing the throne, and the mountains of gold and silver he used to grease palms and maintain his princely dignity. And what he truly longed for all along was that white moonlight of his Suwan, who had abandoned him without hesitation for wealth and glory when he was still an unfavored prince, turning around to marry a wealthy merchant from Jiangnan. Now that Suwan had been cast out by her husband's family with nowhere to go, he treasured her like a prize and brought this discarded woman back, even going so far as to threaten divorce just to win a smile from his beauty. And I, the legitimate wife who had supported him with real money for a full 3 years, had become the grain of sand in his eye. Your Highness jests. I didn't even bother to lift my eyelids. I pulled out a silk handkerchief from my sleeve and placed it under my hand, as if that divorce letter was some kind of filthy thing. I picked up the brush directly and signed the 3 bold characters Shen Qingqi at the end with a flourish, then carelessly tossed the brush into the brush washer, making a crisp sound. As for the rest of my life, I won't trouble your Highness, this great benefactor, to worry about it. My decisiveness, without the slightest hesitation, left both Xiao Jingyan and Suwan frozen in place. Xiao Jingyan's brows instantly knotted into a tight knot, a flash of disbelief and slight anger crossing his eyes. In his script, I should have been weeping bitterly, clinging desperately to his leg and begging, or making a huge scene like a jealous shrew, not like this, so calm it bordered on indifference, even carrying a hint of relief. Shen Qingqi, I didn't give him a chance to finish speaking. I abruptly stood up, smoothed out my brocade gown embroidered with peonies in gold thread, turned to my personal head-maid Chunhei, and ordered Chunhei go immediately gather everyone from our Shen family, who came as part of my dowry. Pack up this young lady's dowry, according to the registry, not missing a single item, and take it all away. Yes, miss. Chunhei had been holding back her anger for a while. Hearing this order, her eyes instantly sparkled with excitement. She took the command and left, her footsteps so light it was as if she was about to fly. Seeing this, Suwana immediately put on a frightened expression and spoke in a soft, delicate voice that seemed like it could drip water. Sister, what are you doing? Even if you're leaving, there is no need to make such a big fuss. It makes it look like our Prince Yan's manor has mistreated you and is driving you away. I let out a cold laugh, me sharp gaze cutting toward her like a blade, the corner of my lips curling into an undisguised sneer. Miss Sue, you haven't even warmed the seat of the lady of Prince Yan's manor yet, and you're already eager to put on airs as the mistress of the house. When and how I Shen Qingqi take my things and leave is not for a nameless, statusless divorced woman like you to comment on. Su Wan's face instantly turned deathly pale as I exposed her sore spot to her face. Her eyes reddened and large tears fell as she burrowed into Xiao Jingyan's arms aggrieved. Your Highness, Wana didn't. Wana was only concerned about sister. Xiao Jingyan immediately held her tightly in distress, turned his head to glare at me furiously, veins bulging on his forehead. Shen Qingqi, don't go too far. Wana kindly advised you. How can you be so vicious, Your Highness? I coldly interrupted him. While you're feeling sorry for your sweetheart, you'd better keep your servants in line. My dowry list has 3 copies, one in my hands, one with my Shen family, and one filed with the Imperial Household Department. If anything I'm taking is missing even a single jade piece, or had gained so much as an extra embroidery needle, I will immediately go to Shunshan Prefecture to beat the drum and cry injustice, accusing your Prince Yan's manor of dirty hands and coveting your legal wife's dowry. As soon as these words came out, the manor servants who had been crowding around the door to watch the excitement immediately fell silent as cicadas in winter, not even daring to breathe heavily. Everyone knew that my Shen family's wealth could rival a nation's. Just those 120 Den 8 sedan chairs carrying dowry chests alone took up half the manor's storage. Over these 3 years, everything in the manor, from His Highness's brocade court robes and precious calligraphy paintings at the top, down to the monthly silver allowances for the maids and old servants, all leaked out from between my Shen Qingxi's fingers. My movements were extremely swift, with shockingly high efficiency. My people were all loyal servants I brought from the Shen family. In just an hour's time, the entire manor fell into a autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves' style of plundering. From the large glazed screen from the Western region's tribute in the main hall and the large rosewood desk in the study, down to the Hetian jade carvings on the curio shelf and the complete set of silver cups and chopsticks just made in the kitchen. Even the several famous peonies Wei purple and Yao yellow that I personally spent a fortune to transport from Luoyang for the back garden were dug up by the servants, roots and soil intact, and carefully packed into specially Dan-made flower pots to be taken away. Xiao Jingyan's face changed from iron zen blue to purplish gen red, and finally became almost contorted. He watched helplessly as the head matron directed the servants to seal and carry away the white jade chessboard he used daily, and considered elegant without any mercy. He finally broke down, roaring out of control. Shen Qingqi, have you gone mad? You're even chiseling away the decorative rocks in the courtyard. Are you trying to empty out my entire princely mansion? I stood in front of an extremely luxurious carriage pulled by 4 pure white horses, stepping on the footrest and looking back at him. Amidst the chaos filling the courtyard, I smiled with calm indifference, even with a hint of pity. Your Highness misunderstands. I'm merely taking back what belongs to me. Since we've already gone our separate ways, I can't very well leave my silver here to stabilize someone else's pregnancy. Can I? Having said that, I no longer looked at his exasperated face, and supported by Shunhei's hand, elegantly boarded the carriage. The wheels rolled on, making steady and powerful sounds, leaving the chaos and ruin of Prince Yan's manor forever behind. I leaned against the soft velvet cushion and slowly closed my eyes. Goodbye, Xiao Jingyan. Goodbye to my love that died 3 years ago, that foolish and hopeless love. From today on, I am simply Shen Qingqi, the richest person in the world. After I left with my grand dowry procession parading through the streets, the manor became quite lively for a while. Suwana finally got her wish and moved into the spacious main courtyard. To comfort her frightened, fragile heart, Xiao Jingyan accompanied her day and night. Living in revelry, he seemed to have already forgotten me. His ex-Dian wife, convinced that I was just throwing a tantrum like a pampered young miss and had run back to my parents' home to cry. In his mind, a divorced woman, no matter how rich, would have difficulty moving an inch in the capital and would be scorned by everyone. He confidently told Suwana. Don't worry, within 10 days, Shen Qingxi will definitely be unable to bear the gossip and rumors outside. She'll come back crying with her dowry, begging this prince. When that time comes, even if she wants to be a concubine, this prince will have to be in the mood. However, reality's slap always comes fast and hard. 3 days passed. I didn't go back. Meanwhile, at Prince Yan's manor, earth-shaking changes began to occur. Without my dowry silver constantly supplementing them, the prince's manor, which originally spent money like water, immediately found its expenses stretched thin and fell into a terrible fiscal deficit. Suwana's premium rock sugar blood swallow's nest that she unfailingly drank every morning to maintain her beauty was cut off. What the main kitchen sent up was just a bowl of ordinary broken bird's nest. She felt the autumn wind was getting chilly and wanted to make a few fashionable new shoe brocade outfits. She haughtily took her maidservants to the capital's finest cloud brocade pavilion. However, when she selected over 1,000 taels worth of fabric and habitually told the shopkeeper to put it on Prince Yan's manor's account, she was mercilessly refused in public by the shopkeeper. My apologies, Miss Su. Our proprietor gave instructions long ago. No credit for anyone from Prince Yan's manor. If you haven't brought cash, please put down these fabrics and don't delay the distinguished guests behind you from making their selections. Suwana was humiliated in public and trembled with rage. In the end, under the contemptuous gazes of the noble ladies, she covered her face, crying as she ran back to the carriage. The servants who once obeyed her every command and addressed her as master at every turn now, began to comply in appearance but oppose in practice, doing things half-heartedly, because they keenly noticed that this new mistress was far from being as wealthy and generous as the former princess consort. Even their monthly wages for this month, the steward had withheld half, using the accounts office having cash flow problems as an excuse. The former luxury of the princely mansion was like flowers in a mirror or the moon in water. Overnight it was scattered by the autumn wind, revealing the shabby, dilapidated foundation beneath. Xiao Jingyan finally realized something was extremely wrong. On this day, he was handling official business in his study and wanted to write a memorial. He reached out to grab his usual Changshintang paper, but instead touched a stack of rough inferior quality rice paper. He looked for that 100 dan gold, purple dan tipped brush, but found only a few balding goat dan hairbrushes left in the brush holder. Even the chair he was sitting on having had its original rosewood chair taken away and replaced with an ordinary birchwood chair, made grating creaking sounds with the slightest movement. Irritated, he swept the inferior brushes off the table to the floor and shouted for the steward. Has Madam not had enough of this nonsense? Send someone to the Shen family to deliver a message. Tell her this king's patience is limited, and she better bring everything back right now. In his mind, Shen Qingqi must have regretted it but couldn't swallow her pride, so she needed him to give her a way out. Upon hearing this, the steward's body shook violently, his face looking 100 times worse than someone in mourning. He knelt on the ground, trembling, sweating profusely, and stammered in response. Your Highness, Madam, she didn't return to the Shen family. Xiao Jingyan froze, his brows furrowed tightly. Didn't return to the Shen family. Then where did she go? The butler's voice was trembling, and he shouted with his eyes almost closed, bracing himself for death. Your Highness, the lady moved out of the royal residence 3 days ago, and that very afternoon she remarried. What did you say? Xiao Jingyan shot to his feet, stepped forward in one stride, and grabbed the butler's collar in a death grip. His eyes instantly turned red as blood, like an enraged lion. Say, that to me again she dares to remarry. Who did she marry? The butler was nearly suffocating from his grip and stammered. Married the crippled prince. His Highness Murong Yuan. I heard the imperial edict came down that very day, and yesterday they already had a grand wedding with all the fanfare. Murong Yuan. These 3 words were like 1,000 jam-pound iron hammer, slamming hard into Xiao Jingyan's chest, shaking him until his internal organs were in severe pain. Murong Yuan, the current 9th imperial uncle, that prince who once dominated battlefields across the land, but had his legs crippled by an assassination attempt, forever confined to a wheelchair. A crippled prince. He was not only the late emperor's most beloved son, but also Xiao Jingyan's most dreaded and hated sworn enemy at court. With rage and anxiety attacking his heart, Xiao Jingyan felt a sweetness rise in his throat and forcefully spat out a mouthful of stifled blood staining red. The stack of rough paper before him, his legs gave way, and he collapsed into that cheap birchwood chair. He is not angry that I remarried. He is angry about who I remarried. I, Shen Qingxi, the foremost noble lady of the capital, would rather marry a disabled prince in a wheelchair than continue being the legitimate wife of him, the able-embodied Prince Yan. This is practically taking my contempt for him and turning it into a resounding slap, grinding his face hard against the capital's stone pavement, rubbing it back and forth in front of everyone in the world, an utter humiliation. This is an utter humiliation that completely crushes his dignity as a man. At this time in the capital, within the disabled prince's mansion, it was an entirely different scene. The early winter sunlight streamed through the carved window lattice, spilling into the warm pavilion that felt like spring. I was sitting across from Yuan with a small Huangguali wood table between us, playing a game of chess. He wore snow-down white robes, sitting quietly in his specially Dan-made wheelchair. His features were extraordinarily handsome and refined, with a high Dan-bridged nose and thin lips slightly pursed. Though his legs couldn't walk, the calm and imposing aura between his brows, honed through countless battles and decisive killings, commanded respect without anger. That former husband of yours should be coughing up blood in rage in his study by now. His slender fingers picked up a black stone, gently placing it on the board. His voice was deep and pleasant, his tone as flat as if discussing the weather, betraying no emotion. I smiled softly and placed a white piece, blocking his path. Isn't that perfect? The more frantic he gets, the more convincing our act looks to outsiders. That is right. This marriage between Murong Yuan and me that shocked the court was essentially a shocking transaction where each got what they needed. The very afternoon I left Prince Yan's manor. He took that divorce document still bearing Xiao Jingyan's handwriting, along with a dowry list 100 pages thick, and headed straight for this secluded, crippled prince's manor. Facing this reclusive god of war, he didn't waste any words and got straight to the point. Ninth Prince, I need an absolutely safe sanctuary that no one dares to provoke, to completely escape Xiao Jingyan's relentless pestering in the future. And you, plotting great ambitions, urgently need my Shen family's wealth that rivals a nation, as well as the secret connections my father left behind in the Ministry of War. We cooperate, each taking what we need. How about it? Murong Yuan looked at me quietly then. In those eyes as deep as a cold pool, a barely perceptible flash of surprise appeared first, then slowly transformed into understanding and deep appreciation. Miss Shen truly is a female Zhuge Liang, extraordinary in courage and insight. He rotated the white jade thumb ring on his finger. It is just this method of cooperation. We'll get married, I said decisively, my gaze unwavering. I want Xiao Jingyan to know clearly that I, Shen Qingxi, am not some abandoned woman who can't live without him. I also want everyone in the world to see that I, Shen Qingxi, even after divorce, am still the most noble princess consort in this great Qing dynasty. As for you with me, the daughter of the wealthiest family, as your princess consort, your bargaining chips in the court will be unmatched by anyone. Murong Yuan fell silent for a moment, staring at me with profound eyes for a long while. Finally, he slowly nodded his head. Fine. However, I'm saying this up front. This is merely a contractual transaction. When the dust settles one day, our marriage agreement will automatically dissolve. At that time, with the sky high and sea wide, I'll set you free. It is a deal. So relying on the Shen family's connections and Murong Yuan standing before the Empress Dowager, we moved with astonishing speed to have the Empress Dowager, who had been devoted to Buddhism for years, personally bestow the marriage. The Empress Dowager was already extremely dissatisfied with Xiao Jingyan's behavior of favoring concubines over his wife and neglecting the descendant of a meritorious minister. So she readily agreed. A marriage that seemed absurd on the surface, but was actually full of undercurrents, was thus decisively settled within 2 days. We were just talking when the butler rushed in to report, Your Highness, the princess consort, Prince Yan Xiao Jingyan has brought a squad of guards and forced his way in aggressively. He is making a scene in the front hall, saying he absolutely must see the princess consort today. Yuan lifted his eyes and glanced at me, a trace of cold light flashing through his deep gaze. I calmly put down the white ghost stone in my hand, smoothed my sleeves, and stood up, me skirt tracing an elegant arc. Let's go. Since an old acquaintance has come to visit, we should go meet him. In the front hall, Xiao Jingyan was in a disheveled state. His hair was somewhat messy, his eyes bloodshot and red, pacing back and forth in the hall like a thoroughly enraged wild beast that had lost all reason. Hearing the sound of the wheelchair rolling, he whipped his head around. When he saw me standing behind Yuan, me hands resting naturally on the armrests of the wheelchair, his eyes nearly shot out flames. "Shen Qingxi, you fickle, treacherous, poisonous woman, how dare you humiliate me like this?" He pointed at me and cursed furiously. I frowned slightly, my gaze instantly turning cold. I pushed Yuan forward a step, my posture intimate yet my tone as distant as ice and snow. "Prince Yan, please watch your words. No, you should address me respectfully as Princess Yuan or Imperial Aunt. Also, this is the heavily guarded Prince Yuan's manor, not some marketplace where you can shout and yell. Please show some respect." "You!" Xiao Jingyan's fingers trembled violently as he pointed sharply at Yuan sitting in the wheelchair, roaring at me. "Shen Qingxi, have you lost your mind? You'd rather marry a cripple who can't even stand than lower your head and come back to beg me. What can he give you besides an empty title?" Yuan's expression instantly darkened, and the air around us seemed to freeze into frost. Outside the door, the hidden guard's hands were already on their sword hilts, but at this moment I burst out laughing with a poochie sound. Me laughter was crisp and full of mockery. I leaned down and whispered something extremely gently into Yuan's ear, then straightened up and looked at Xiao Jingyan with the gaze one would give a pitiful wretch, saying each word clearly and resoundingly. "That is right. Because in my heart, an iron-blooded hero who sits in a wheelchair and once fought for the country is far, far greater and more noble than a hypocritical coward who stands in high position and only knows how to climb up by clinging to women's coattails." These words were like a sharp dagger, precisely piercing into Xiao Jingyan's most insecure and sensitive heart, completely crushing the last shred of his rationality. He roared, drew the sword from his waist, and lunged at me like he'd lost his mind, wanting to strike me. However, he had only taken 2 steps when, with a sharp clang, the 2 black Dan-clad guards behind Yuan flashed out like ghosts. Their unsheathed scabbards struck heavily against the back of his knees, pressing him down firmly onto the cold blue brick floor, rendering him immobile. Xiao Jingyan, Yuan looked down condescendingly at the man struggling frantically on the ground, his voice cold as 10,000 Jan-year Dan-old ice. "This is my territory. Today you trespassed into the prince's manor and spoke disrespectfully. This prince has the right to detain you. Get out. Otherwise, don't blame this prince for disregarding our clan ties and impeaching you before the emperor." Watching his incompetent rage and complete loss of composure, I found it utterly laughable. Even at this point, he is still living in his own world. He still doesn't understand that what he has lost isn't just a docile wife, but a powerful backing that could have helped him rise smoothly through the ranks and turn misfortune into fortune. Although Xiao Jingyan was driven away in disgrace, he clearly didn't intend to let this go. He tried to use what little influence he had left in the court, targeting the old subordinates my father had left behind at every turn, attempting to pressure the Shen family and force me to submit. However, he vastly underestimated me, Shen Qingqing. Since I've decided to have a falling out with him, how could I not be fully prepared? I grew up following my father, fighting and struggling in the business world since childhood. The first step of my counterattack is to completely cut off the economic lifeline of his Yan Prince manor. I sorted out all the account books of the shops, estates, mines, and banks under my name. I stayed up 3 all-den nighters in the study of Yuan Prince Manor, formulating a watertight and extremely ruthless business warfare plan. First, I sent down orders for the capital's largest grain chain store, Shen's Rice Shop, to issue an announcement, starting today, to give back to the people. All grain and oil prices are reduced by 30%. This move of pulling the rug out from under him directly left those few small grain shops under Xiao Jingyan's name, which he used to make exorbitant profits, with no ability to fight back. The common people of the capital aren't fools, they all flocked to Shen's to snap up the goods. Within half a month, those few grain shops of Xiao Jingyan's had to close down for good, due to having so few customers you could catch sparrows at the door, mouldy and bug-infested grain, and severe losses. Next came a comprehensive blockade in clothing, food, housing, and transportation. My Cloud Brocade Pavilion launched a series of new styles of fabric and ready-made clothing designed by top embroiderers from Jiangnan. Innovative designs at fair prices immediately set the entire capital's circle of noble ladies on fire. Meanwhile, that rainbow garment workshop that Su Wan frequently patronized had no new goods, and with me secretly cutting off their silk supply chain, they had nothing to sell. I heard that Su Wan once tried to use her status to buy clothes at other fabric shops, but the owners of all the major fabric shops had already received word from me and directly had their clerks politely escort her out. She was so angry that she smashed all the teacups in her carriage and cried the whole way back. Xiao Jingyan's financial situation rapidly deteriorated at a visible speed, to the point of depletion. As a prince, he secretly maintained an extremely large force of hidden guards and private soldiers to compete for the throne. The monthly military pay and weapon maintenance alone was an enormously huge running expense. Previously, with my dowry silver continuously filling the gap, he had no pressure at all. No, this bottomless pit required him to pay out of his own pocket. Before long, with nowhere else to turn, he began secretly selling off antique calligraphy, paintings, and valuable furniture from the estate. But what he never expected was that the largest pawn shop in the capital, with the strongest buying power, Jubaojai, had me as the major owner behind the scenes. I had long ago instructed the manager of Jubaojai that anything bearing the mark of Prince Yan's estate or brought in by Xiao Jingyan's people should be priced as low as possible, without exception. A priceless, well-gem-preserved Ru kiln vase from the previous dynasty, when placed on the counter at Jubaojai, only got the manager to lift his eyelids and hold up 5 fingers. Crude workmanship has hidden cracks 50 taels at most dead pawn. The subordinate Xiao Jingyan sent to sell off assets was furious and stomping mad, but after searching the entire city couldn't find a second pawn shop willing to take the items because the other small pawn shop simply didn't dare offend the Shen family. In the end, with no rice to cook and his back against the wall, Xiao Jingyan could only grit his teeth and pinch his nose while accepting this daylight robbery of a price. What does it mean that the highest level of business warfare often employs the simplest methods? Directly cut off your supply lines, intercept your sources. Even the pawn shop counter where you go to exchange for money is opened by this young lady. Xiao Jingyan still thought he was some domineering prince. Little did he know he'd already become a lamb for slaughter in the female-led business empire. Want to pursue true love without money? Hilarious. Next month you won't even be able to pay your private soldiers' wages. This series of economic sanctions is a total dimensional reduction strike. During that time, the days at Prince Yan's manor were 100 times harder than those of common folk, supposedly because Su Wana's monthly cosmetics allowance had been slashed to just a few taels of silver. She had several huge fights with Xiao Jingyan in the main courtyard, even getting physical. That relationship of theirs, that was once celebrated as a beautiful tale of earth, shattering pure love, quickly lost its luster under the merciless grind of daily necessities and poverty, revealing its ugly, selfish, true nature. I sat in the garden of Prince Yuan's residence, peeling crystal clear grapes while listening to reports from my secret guards, feeling incredibly refreshed. Even the cold winter wind seemed gentle to me. Xiao Jingyan, this is just the beginning. Since you loved trampling over my flesh and blood to provide for your white moonlight, I'll return everything you put me through, 10-fold, 100-fold, while beating Xiao Jingyan back economically and leaving him breathless. I didn't forget to prepare a big gift for his delicate white moonlight either. I've always been meticulous. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Su Wana leaving Xiao Jingyan for wealth back then, only to suddenly return after being cast aside right when Xiao Jingyan was enfoffed as a prince. I mobilized the Shen family's most elite intelligence network and sent people galloping to Jiangnan to conduct a thorough covert investigation of the merchant family she had married into. With great rewards come brave men. In just half a month, the truth along with thick evidence was laid on my desk. After reading that secret report, I couldn't help but clap my hands and laugh heartily. Turns out, Suwana's story back then wasn't at all what she publicly claimed, forced to tearfully marry another to save her family from ruin. The real truth is, she looked down on Xiao Jingyan, who was just an unfavored prince with no powerful maternal family at the time, and actively hooked up with the son of a wealthy merchant who was traveling to Jiangnan. She even went so far as to force him into marriage by using her pregnancy, marrying into his family in grand style. Unfortunately, what goes around comes around. Her merchant husband was an extreme womanizer who got tired of her within 3 years and took in one young new lover after another. Seeing her position as the legitimate wife in jeopardy, Suwana took desperate risks to secure his favor. She secretly carried on an affair with a personal guard in the household, attempting to deceive everyone by using a fake legitimate son to consolidate her position. In the end, the affair was exposed and her husband caught her red-handed. The merchant family, finding it too shameful, didn't make a big fuss about it, but simply divorced her on the grounds of failing to observe wifely duties. What is even more ironic and fatal is that when she was divorced and kicked out, she was already 2 months pregnant with that guard's child. With nowhere to turn and her reputation ruined in Jiangnan, she finally remembered that back in the capital there was still that honest man Xiao Jingyan who couldn't forget her. So she traveled all the way back to the capital and put on a tearful sob story, successfully making Xiao Jingyan the sucker who took over as the cheap dad. When I received the investigation results, I was in the greenhouse trimming an extremely precious clivia plant. After listening to Shunhe's vivid report, the silver scissors in my hand went snip, cutting off the thickest leaf that had insect holes in it. What a Suwan, what a pure white lotus flower of this prosperous age. I put down the scissors, my eyes full of mockery, playing the Grand Prince Yan of the great Qing dynasty like a fool in the palm of her hand. If Xiao Jingyan knew the truth, he'd probably go mad with rage on the spot. I took that investigation report, detailed enough to include times and locations, along with the signed confession from the guard I'd bribed with a fortune and secretly escorted to the capital, and put them all together in a sealed envelope. Shunhe. I handed her the envelope and lowered my voice. Find a way, spend whatever it takes to bribe the palace eunuchs, and make sure to deliver this thing to Consort Dead's dressing table in the palace, without anyone knowing. Consort D was Xiao Jingyan's birth mother, and currently the woman in the harem who valued propriety the most, cared about face the most, and had the most ruthless methods. She already looked down on someone like Suwana with her status as a remarried woman, thinking her unworthy of her precious son. She only reluctantly held her nose and accepted it because Xiao Jingyan stubbornly insisted and threatened with a hunger strike. If she were to find out that Suwana is not only a shameless, venomous woman, but also pregnant with the bloodline of a lowly guard, attempting to taint the imperial bloodline of the great Qing, and committing this crime of deceiving the emperor that warrants the execution of 9 generations of kin, I can almost vividly imagine what kind of earth-shattering thunderous fury Consort D will unleash. This painted skin, let me, Shen Qingzi, personally tear it off for you. Consort Dead's actions were even faster than I imagined, and her methods far more swift and decisive than I anticipated. The morning after the secret report was sent into the palace, Consort D directly sent out the 2 most formidable old nannies by her side under the pretext of this palace will personally select a consort for Prince Yan and summons the primary consort into the palace to discuss, along with a team of palace guards, forcibly inviting Suwana, who was still in her dreams, from Prince Yan's manor into the palace. Inside the solemn Yongge palace, Suwana wasn't given any chance to make excuses. In front of several trusted concubines in the palace, Consort D took that investigation report, bearing the official seal, and like delivering a slap to the face, harshly threw it at Suwana's terror-stricken face. Immediately after, from behind the screen in the great hall, 2 eunuchs dragged out a man who had been beaten into a wretched state. It was precisely that Jiangnan guard who had an illicit affair with Suwan. The moment Suwana saw that man, Her psychological defenses completely collapsed. Her legs went weak and she slumped down onto the cold golden bricks, so frightened she couldn't even speak a word. The imperial concubine D didn't even bother to give her another glance. She directly ordered the imperial physician to come forward and examine her pulse, and using the royal secret bone den dripping kinship verification method, extracted a drop of fetal blood from Suwan to verify against the guard. The result was self-den evident, irrefutable evidence. The child in Suwanner's belly, which Xiao Jingyan treasured like a jewel and listened to its movements every day with his ear against her stomach, was not some noble imperial dragon heir at all, but the guard's illegitimate child. Tainting the imperial bloodline, disgracing the family name, you shameless criminal woman who knows neither heaven nor earth. Your crimes are truly unforgivable even by 10,000 deaths. Imperial concubine D was trembling all over with rage. After pointing at Suwana and cursing her, she actually suffered a sudden attack from her anger and fainted on the spot. This matter was like a bombshell that instantly exploded throughout the entire palace and the capital. When the emperor heard about it, he flew into a thunderous rage and smashed all the inkstones on his imperial desk. Xiao Jingyan was urgently summoned to the palace. In the golden throne hall, in front of all the civil and military officials, the emperor smashed that kinship verification report in his face and gave him a thorough tongue-down lashing, scolding him for being extremely foolish, blinded by lust, simply disgracing the entire imperial family. On the spot, his double prince's salary was stripped away, his salary was penalized for 3 years, and he was ordered to return to his residence and reflect behind closed doors for half a year, forbidden to go out without an imperial decree. Overnight, Xiao Jingyan went from the high and mighty Prince Yan to the biggest joke in the entire capital. In tea houses and wine shops, everyone was vividly discussing how the dignified Prince Yan had been cuckolded, even treasuring someone else's offspring as his own, and had almost entered this bloodline into the imperial jade registry. His reputation completely plummeted and shattered into mud. Those ministers who had once attached themselves to him and wanted to support him in the succession all distanced themselves from him, as if avoiding snakes and scorpions. His political career was completely over. As for the instigator Suwana's fate, it was even more miserable. After Consort De woke up, the first thing she did was petition the emperor for a decree. The emperor, utterly disgusted, directly issued an edict, strip Suwana of all titles and status, reduce her to commoner status, exile her to the clothing wash bureau in the most desolate borderlands of the great Qing dynasty, serve the harshest labor for life, never to be freed from her registration. This was the great Qing imperial family's most ruthless and severe method of dealing with women who had committed the crime of deceiving the monarch. I heard that, after losing the luxurious food and clothing of the prince's manor, Suwana suffered day and night during her journey under escort to the laundry bureau at the border. Unable to bear the despair of soaking in ice water day and night to wash clothes, she finally ended her calculating life in despair on a snowy winter night, weakened by both illness and hunger. When Xiao Jingyan walked out of the palace in a daze and heard the news of Suwana's exile, he just stood numbly in the snow outside the palace gates for a long time without saying a word. He didn't enter the palace to plead for Suwan, and didn't even send anyone to deliver her a single piece of warm clothing, perhaps. At this moment, after his dignity and power were completely crushed, he finally woke up as if from a dream and saw clearly what he had lost for a treacherous, calculating woman. He lost me, who was wholeheartedly devoted to him, lost the Shen family's unshakable financial resources and military power support, lost the throne that was within his grasp, and lost all the dignity he had as a prince and as a man. He returned to the prince's manor that was like an ice cellar, locked himself tightly in his study, drinking day and night, getting dead drunk, crying his eyes out like a fey person. But when the wall falls, Ivrion pushes. The power struggles of the court have always been cold and merciless. Soon, the censorate, which had always seen him as a thorn in their side, seized the opportunity to kick him while he was down. Digging up old cases from years ago where he had embezzled state funds meant for river repairs to finance his private army, and engaged in factionalism for personal gain. Former members of the Shen family fanned the flames from within, with both witnesses and evidence present, forming an ironclad case that left no room for him to argue his way out. The emperor had already been utterly disappointed and disgusted with him over the matter of confusing the bloodline. Taking this embezzlement case as an opportunity and to quell public outrage, the emperor mercilessly issued an imperial edict that shocked the realm. Prince Yan Xiaojingyan is stripped of his princely title and demoted to commoner status. All family assets are to be confiscated, and he is to depart immediately, exiled 3,000 li to the miasma-den-ridden lands of Lingnan, never to return to the capital for the rest of his life. On the day of the house raid, goose-jan feather snow began falling from the sky. I wore an extremely luxurious snow fox cloak, holding a hand warmer, standing quietly by the window of a private room in the finest restaurant across the street from Prince Yan's manor. I watched coldly as those soldiers charged in like wolves and tigers into that place where I had lived for 3 years, driving out the few remaining pieces of furniture and the servants who were trembling with fear. Before long, Xiao Jingyan was escorted out by 2 burly soldiers. Staggering through that dilapidated gate, his hair was disheveled, his face covered in grime and stubble, wearing only a thin, rough prison uniform, with heavy shackles on his hands and feet. The once high-spirited and arrogant prince now looked as wretched as a stray dog, as if sensing something in the dark. He suddenly raised his head and looked accurately toward the window where I was, through the wind and snow filling the sky. Our eyes met across the bustling street and the falling snowflakes. In his eyes there was extreme shock, regret, pain, unwillingness, and a trace of what seemed like a humble plea for my forgiveness. I showed no emotional fluctuation. I just quietly watched him, as if looking at a complete stranger with no connection to me. Then I picked up a cup of warm plum wine from the table, raised it toward him in a distant toast, tilted my head back, and drank it all in one gulp. Xiao Jingyan, between you and me, all grudges, all karma, are completely settled in this cup of wine. From now on, you walk your road to the Yellow Springs. I cross my single Jan-plank bridge. No, you have no road left to walk. What awaits you is only the endless miasma and frost of that exiled land, and the long despair and remorse more terrible than death itself. After Xiao Jingyan was exiled to Lingnan, the power struggle for succession in the capital gradually became clearer. Murong Yuan, me nominal crippled prince husband, with the secret support of my Shen family's vast wealth and the strong backing of his old subordinates from the Ministry of War, began to shine brilliantly in the imperial court and emerge as a rising star. He was no longer that prince who shut himself indoors all day and suffered cold stares from others. He had returned to the very center of power. Using the intelligence network I provided, he employed thunderous methods to consecutively purge several corrupt officials in the court, and proposed multiple new policies that benefited the country and the people while filling the national treasury. Only then did the civil and military officials and the common people discover in shock that this former god of war was not a Phaeton at all, but rather possessed the extraordinary talent of an emperor capable of governing the nation and bringing peace to the land. Even more incredible was that half a year later, at the Empress Dowager's grand birthday banquet, Murong Yuan actually threw away the wheelchair that had accompanied him for years in front of everyone, stood up steadily, and performed a set of fierce and domineering swordplay on the spot as a birthday tribute. It turned out his leg injury had been secretly healed 2 years ago by a wandering divine physician. The reason he had been enduring and suppressing himself all along, sitting in a wheelchair pretending to be crippled, was merely to lull the other princes competing for the throne into complacency while secretly accumulating power, waiting for the moment to strike a fatal blow. For a time, the court and the public were shaken, and the entire realm was in an uproar. The emperor looked at this son, the one most like himself, skilled in both civil and military affairs, tears streaming down his aged face. He lavished praise upon him, and immediately entrusted him with the heavy responsibility of governing the realm. Murong Yuan instantly became the hottest and most undisputed candidate to enter the Eastern Palace and become the new crown prince. And I, as his legitimate princess consort who married him during his most difficult times as a virtuous helpmate, naturally rose in status along with him, becoming the #1 figure that all the noble women in the capital eagerly sought to curry favor with. But deep down, I knew very clearly that with Xiao Jingyan, or common enemy, completely fallen. The contract we had originally agreed upon was about to expire. That night, the late autumn moonlight was beautiful, pouring like water over the courtyard of Prince Yuan's manor. After handling his heavy official duties, Murong Yuan dismissed his attendants and came alone to the courtyard where I lived. Qingxi, he looked at me, his deep eyes reflecting the stars filling the sky, his gaze more serious and tender than ever before. Xiao Jingyan has been completely exiled, and the situation at court is settled. That agreement we made back then can be voided. I was brewing tea when I heard this. Me movements paused for a moment, then I lifted my head and calmly nodded. I'll write tomorrow. I'll have someone prepare the divorce papers. I'll publicly claim that I have a hidden illness, so it won't affect your highness's future establishment of a new crown princess. No, you've misunderstood. He suddenly stepped forward and reached out to press down on my hand that was pouring tea. His palm was warm and strong. What I mean is, that fake transaction contract is void. We can start a real marriage. Qingxi, I stay, be my wife, and in the future, become the most noble empress in this land. I will use my entire life, these thousands of miles of rivers and mountains, to compensate for the suffering you've endured. I was slightly stunned, looking at this powerful man before me who had fought side by side with me for nearly a year. Undeniably, he was extremely outstanding, brave and resourceful, and full of the fatal charm of a mature ruler. In the past half-year, he had treated me with respect and care in every possible way. If I had met him before I met Xiao Jingyan, before I experienced that failed relationship, perhaps I would have hopelessly fallen for him. But now, having weathered countless storms, my heart was no longer that of a sheltered young woman who could be easily moved by love or the position of empress. I gently pulled my hand out from his palm. I looked at him, my eyes clear and bright, and gave him a radiant smile, smiling freely and unrestrained. Murong Yuan, I'm very grateful for your protection and respect over the past half-year. However, I no longer want to marry anyone, nor do I want to be trapped in that even more magnificent golden cage called the Imperial Palace. I stood up, spread my arms wide, and took a deep breath of the crisp winter night air. I don't want to pin my emotions, joy, anger, sorrow, or happiness, on another person anymore, not even on the emperor. In this world, only the wealth and freedom held in one's own hands will never betray you. I want to go back to being Shen Qingxi, to be the richest person who can command the winds and rain in the business world, not someone's princess consort or someone's empress. Murong Yuan looked at me quietly. The light in his eyes flickered slightly, flashing with a trace of deep loss and regret. But soon, that regret was replaced by an even deeper understanding and respect. He knew that this radiant woman before him belonged to a broader world, not the inner quarters of the Imperial Palace. He slowly stepped back, nodded at me solemnly, his voice gentle yet as firm as ever. All right, I respect your choice. No matter when, no matter where you go, even to the ends of the earth. As long as I, Murong Yuan, Livy and the future great Qing dynasty will forever be your strongest support. A few days later, news came from the palace that left countless people with regret. Princess Consort Shen of the Yuan prince's residence, due to injuries sustained in earlier years that damaged her constitution, making her frail and sickly, requested to enter the imperial family's highest Dan-ranked Taoist temple to become a lay practitioner, praying for the fortune of the great Qing nation, and would no longer concern herself with worldly affairs for the rest of her life. The emperor, deeply moved by her great merit in donating most of her family fortune to enrich the national treasury, specially granted her request and bestowed upon her the title Lady Huiguo Huisi, Protector of the Nation and Compassionate Benefactor. In the most dignified way, in a manner no one could find fault with, I extracted myself completely from this whirlpool of imperial power and gained total freedom. Of course, I never went to any Taoist temple. One morning, I changed into a neat set of men's clothing, a moonjan white robe, holding a folding fan, and together with Chonhei and a group of trusted confidants, I boarded the largest southbound merchant ship of the Shen family. The world is so vast and the territory of Daqing so expansive, I wanted to measure it all myself. In the years that followed, My banks and money houses opened in every prefecture across the nation. My ocean, then-going merchant fleet, carrying silk and porcelain, travelled the magnificent maritime Silk Road. I've seen the magnificent sunset where lonely smoke rises straight over the great desert, and I've seen the gentle misty rain over the water towns south of the Yangtze. I became the figure spoken of in the circles of Jianggu and commerce. The mysterious young master Shen, whose wealth rivaled nations and who could overturn clouds with one hand and rain with the other. Occasionally, in inns of foreign lands, I would also hear news that had travelled from the capital. Murong Yuan eventually ascended to the throne as he wished, becoming an enlightened ruler who ushered in a golden age. What was astonishing was that after his coronation, he defied all opposition and never established an empress for his entire life. He only left the most honoured position in the imperial harem, the phoenix throne forever vacant. When I hear these things, I usually just stand at the bow facing the sea breeze, smiling faintly. The women of this world who says the only narrow path we can take is to marry, bear children, and be trapped in the inner chambers, severing the shackles of dependence, relying on our own hands and wisdom, we can equally brave the winds and waves, living freely and vibrantly. After finishing this story, I was really thrilled, but also deeply moved. To be honest, when I first started reading, I thought this was just a traditional cliché-fake-feel, good story about divorcing the husband for revenge latching onto an even thicker thigh. But when I got to the part where Shen Qingxi rejected Murong Yuan and gave up becoming empress, I was completely won over by this female lead's vision. In the ancient society where women were treated as appendages, facing a devoted, handsome emperor who held power over the realm, facing the highest position of power, the Phoenix throne, that so many women dreamed of, she actually smiled and said no. Why? Because after experiencing that last marriage that crushed her to pieces, she understood more clearly than anyone, no matter how big an umbrella someone else gives you, it is not as good as having your own roof to shelter from the rain. This is also a little insight that I, Elena, especially want to share with all girls. Whether we're studying hard on campus or fighting our way through the workplace, we need to understand true security and confidence always come from the balance in your bank account, the knowledge in your head, and your ability to say no at any time. Love and marriage are certainly wonderful, but they're just the icing on the cake of life, definitely not a lifeline to save you in desperate times. Don't be a dodder flower clinging to an oak tree, but be a kapok tree standing shoulder to shoulder with the oak. I hope each and every one of you reading this story can have the kind of spirit that Shen Qingxi has, able to pick things up and let them go. Go pursue your career. Go improve yourself. Go measure the broader world. No matter how fierce the storms get, we should rely on our own hands to live brilliantly and freely. Love you all. See you in the next great story.